Hello and welcome to this video where I'm going to be talking about chapter 8 of IGCSE economics, which talks about supply. In the previous video we talked about demand, and here we're going to talk about supply, and I'm just going to go straight into it, try to make it as short as possible. First we start with the definition of supply, and this is the willingness and ability to sell a product. Just as I defined demand, I'm going to define supply again, and I'm going to call supply the quantity of a product that suppliers are willing, so quantity of a product that suppliers are willing and able to bring to the market. So most important words here is that suppliers are willing and they are able to bring to the market at a given price. Now, it's very important for you to know the difference between supply and production, because sometimes suppliers can bring what they have already stored, which is called stock, into the market, and sometimes they can store what they have produced. So sometimes they can bring what is already stocked, and sometimes they can store what is produced. Right, now there is a direct relationship between price and supply, and this will be opposite from what we learned in demand. Here suppliers want to bring something to the market when prices are high, and they are not willing to bring to the market when prices are low. So supply will have a positive graph. I'm just going to draw that graph here for you. This is how the graph of supply is going to look like. Here you have price, and here you have quantity. You can write P and Q if you wish. It's the same thing. You can write P here and Q here. And the supply curve is going to be an upward sloping curve, to mean that when prices are high, suppliers will want to bring more quantity to the market. Now, again, as we talked about demand, we have what is called individual supply. This is the supply of one firm, what one firm is willing to bring to the market for one product. And market supply would be the supply of all the firms supplying that product, that one product, into the market. So for example, the supply of bread for one individual bread producer would be individual supply, but for all the bread producers in a certain market, that would be market supply. Now, how we get market supply is that we're going to aggregate all the individual supplies, and we just aggregate the horizontal axis, the quantity axis, because the price remains the same. The price remains the same, and we're going to aggregate all the quantities, and we're going to get the market supply. Again, the supply curve is derived from a supply schedule, which basically puts quantities alongside price. And as I've said, the higher the price, the higher the quantity, and so the supply curve is going to slope upwards like that from the supply schedule. Now, so as you can see, one of the things that determines supply, one of the conditions of supply, a very major condition, is price. That when the price is high, the supply is very likely to be high. All right, now, so when supply increases, when there's an increase in quantity supplied, we call that an extension in supply. Extension in supply. So that's an increase in the quantity supplied, and this is because of an increase in price. And on the other hand, a contraction in supply is going to be a fall in the quantity supplied because of a fall in price. So for supply, when price goes up, quantity supplied also goes up, and the vice versa is true. When the price goes down, quantity supplied also goes down. Right, so let me show you what an extension looks like on a graph, and this is a simple supply curve. So it's sloping upwards. If we start at this point A here, and this is this price, in case the price increases to maybe P2, so let's call this P1, the supply is gonna increase. So that's the line is not very straight. So the quantity supplied is gonna increase. So the quantity supplied goes that way, and price goes that way. And from A to this point is what we're calling an extension. So this is called an extension in supply. Extension in supply. And on the other hand, a contraction in supply is going to look the exact opposite. So if this is your supply curve, you're starting at this point A here, and you move to another point B here, that is going to be called a contraction in supply. So if you start from A going to B here, this is called a contraction in supply. So price goes down and quantity decreases also. So that is called a contraction in supply, and it's caused by either an increase or a decrease in price. So this one is caused by an increase in price, and this one is caused by a decrease in price. All right, now any other factor that you're going to look at from now on is going to cause what is called an increase in supply. So supply curve is going to shift either to the right or to the left, and this is what is called a shift in supply. So I'm just going to draw here a shift in supply to show increased supply. So again, this is price, this is quantity, and if this is the supply curve, if there's an increase in supply, so let's call this supply curve 1, and we're going to call this supply curve 2. And basically what an increase in supply does is that it causes the supply curve to shift to the right. So this is an increase in supply. Remember, the other one was increase in quantity supplied, and this is an increase in supply. And this one here is going to show a decrease in supply, where the supply curve is going to shift to the left, so like that. So this is called a decrease in supply, or a left shift of the supply curve. So this is called a decrease in supply, and this other one is called an increase in supply. Okay, so any other factor other than price is going to cause the supply curve to shift to the left. If there's an increase, if there's something that can cause supply to increase, it's going to shift the supply curve to the right. And if there's something that's going to cause supply curve to decrease, it's going to shift the supply curve to the left. Okay, so here's an example. So for example, these are some of the conditions of supply. I'm going to make them smaller so that you can see all of them at once. We have changes in costs of production, improvements in technology, we have taxes, we have subsidies, we have natural factors such as weather conditions, and we have prices of other products, and of course other factors such as disasters, war, and discovery of new resources. So let's begin with the first one. I'm just going to do the first two, and then you're going to be able to figure out the rest, or I can do the first four. So changes in cost of production. So if there is an increase in cost of production, what we'll be expecting for an increase in cost of production is that the supply curve is going to shift to the left. So if this was your initial supply curve, this is obviously price and quantity, the supply curve is going to shift backwards because of an increase in cost of production. It just means the suppliers now are only able to produce less because cost of production has increased. So increase in cost of production, this can be an increase in wages or salaries, and it's going to cause this supply curve to shift to the left. And of course, a reduction in cost of production is going to shift the supply curve to the right, to the other side. Let's look at improvements in technology. An improvement in technology is going to shift the supply curve to the right. So this is an improvement in technology. It's going to shift supply curve to the right. So an improvement in tech, for example. So I'm just going to write tech. So it's going to shift supply curve to the right. Now, moving on, taxes. If the government charges taxes, for example, taxes introduces a sales tax, it's going to reduce supply and it's going to shift supply curve to the left. So if this is one, another one is taxes. So introduction of taxes is going to shift supply curve to the left. And of course, introduction of a subsidy is going to shift the supply curve to the right. And so just looking at these factors, just try to look at the ones where you think they're going to decrease supply, and those ones are going to shift the supply curve to the left. And those that are going to increase supply are going to shift the supply curve to the right. Again, to draw the supply curve is very easy. Just draw the vertical axis and the horizontal axis. I like to put an arrow to say that that graph can continue. That is price and that is quantity, and the supply curve shifts, slopes upwards. And if you want to show that it's shifting to the left, I've shown you here how the supply curve can shift to the left, and I've shown you here how the supply curve can shift to the right. So again, how the supply curve can shift to the left and how the supply curve can shift to the right. Shifting to the left is an increase in cost of production that causes decrease in supply, and this is an increase in supply maybe because of a subsidy given by the government or an improvement in tech. All right, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm going to see you in the next video where we're going to talk about price determination. All right, ciao.